You are good to go.
All right, great. Well, welcome everyone. Tonight I am excited to introduce Anchorage's own Aaron Johnson, who's going to be talking to us about network engineering, a field that he's been working in the security area for more than the past 10 years, focused on um, public key infrastructure. I was digging around my bookshelf back here and I realized from back in high school I had Bruce Schneer's Applied Cryptography that I read cover to cover, and really have not had to worry about that stuff ever since then. So I'm excited to learn about FIDO. Obviously, a lot has happened since 1998, and hopefully understand a little better how passwordless security in the enterprise works. So with that, please take it away, Aaron.
Okay. I think y'all can hear me, so let's see if I can get the screen share going. All right. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to start my timer because if folks have heard me talk about this stuff before, you know that I can blather about PKI for a long time. So I set a timer so I don't keep you all night. But yeah, so we're looking specifically at hardware authentication. We're going to look at both PKI in the form of X509 and PKC, or public key cryptography, with FIDO2. Now, what I'm going to try and do is compare these two within the same bucket, Azure Active Directory hybrid mode. And the reason why, I think this is a really cool chance to see how awesome, in my opinion, Microsoft has done with the FIDO2 rollout. It's very clever. I gave a talk about VMware's use of certificates for a VMUG meeting a year, I don't even know anymore, but a year or two ago. And that was as cool as I think they've done with this. And when you see someone do something this cool, it really gets you excited. So although FIDO2 is not quite fully baked, I think it's really a neat thing, and I'm excited to talk about it. So we'll get started. All right. Go on and advance. Aha! So yeah, my name is Aaron Johnson. A couple of years ago, I started a business here in Anchorage called Red Dog Consulting, LLC. And my initial intent was to build 1 million PKIs for anyone who needs it, just go bananas. Well, that didn't happen. So I pivoted. And what I did end up doing is really focusing on hardware authentication. And so I took a problem that I'd heard iterated to me a couple of times where folks are reluctant to do hardware authentication because they don't want their staff to have to carry a bunch of cards. So the idea behind that was I would take physical access control system credentials and squeeze it onto the same card you would then use to also get into your logical network. And that worked great. So we got that product. And then recently I just created a game that I'm calling Find 'em Tags, and that's pretty cool. So that'll be on Kickstarter next week, and it's a way to basically use NFC tags to interact with your phone in an app. And folks in Juno are helping me with that, Jason's group. But that's enough of that pitch. So yeah, as Bradley said, my day job is in systems and occasionally network engineering, depending on the need. I have backgrounds in both, and I work with Computer Task Group here in Anchorage. So today's talk, I really want to outline the minimum infrastructure because you can go crazy with this stuff, right? But let's just look at what the fundamental parts to make this stuff work is. So we're going to look at smart cards, X509. We'll also look at, I'm just going to mention PIV because functionally for this demo, they're the same. The way that they do authentication, I'm well aware of the slots and the signing objects and all the pieces that PIV is, but it's kind of still a military thing, right? People are still selling it to they're forcing it on the civilian market. But anyway, so we'll look at smart cards, PIV, and then FIDO2 hardware authentication. Then we'll look at limitations because this stuff is new. FIDO2 is new. There's got to be something holding you back, and unfortunately there is. So we'll look at specifically limitations within this mode of Azure Active Directory Hybrid. Some costs. And then throughout this, we'll do some demonstrations. These are recorded because I know that one should never try a live demo in a presentation, so that's good. So we got these recorded. And then I'm going to talk about some enhancements. And why is that important? Well, it's my belief that it is the time. World Password Day is coming up in what is it, like 9-10 months, and I'd like to see at least everybody on this call investigate the potential of doing one of these password-free authentication mechanisms for your own purpose, to really start sniffing out how this stuff works. So the enhancements are supposed to get you excited about it. So let's get started. FIDO 2, the latest spec out of the FIDO Alliance. And this is the third. UTF, there's some other stuff, but they didn't really take off. Now, all of a sudden, the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room came in, which is Microsoft. And now FIDO 2 is getting the hook, and it's working. It is fleshed out, in my opinion, and it's public key cryptography with a couple of twists. So you've got, at its core with FIDO 2, you've got the client to authenticator protocol. So that's that piece of hardware, and then the web authn. And that's the piece that I thought folks would get excited about here, because that the libraries are available, you know, websites are already using it, phones are using it. It's really, really cool stuff. And then we're going to specifically look at password free, because you can use FIDO 2 as an enhancement to a password, but really, and hopefully I can get this across to folks, what's the point? You know, if you've got a wound, just heal it. Don't dig another one. That's my opinion. And then we're looking at using Windows Hello for Business. And Windows Hello for Business goal is to get us all off the password. So this little slide here that I'm looking at, there's nothing rocket surgery about this. You've got the one step that's different with PKI, and that is that registration step. And you need to do that with a FIDO 2 server. So our FIDO 2 server will be an Azure Active Directory FIDO 2 server on this. So that little unlock point there is when you unlock the secure enclave on that card, and you can get access through, not direct access, of course, but sanctioned access to that private key to do some signing mechanisms, some nonce verification, the magic that happens behind the scene. So I'm going to switch to a script here, because this is so cool. This is what I was referring to with, I think, how Microsoft really did a good job of this. So what we're looking at here is our Azure Active Directory hybrid mode. That line across the middle, we've got everything on-prem below it and everything up in the cloud, up in the magic space, up above it. And then we've got our little Windows 10 client on the left. So step one, the way this works, the user signs into the Windows 10 device by inserting that FIDO 2 security key, and then they actually start with an authentication to Azure AD. And this is really, really cool, because number two, what happens is Azure AD checks its directory for a Kerberos server key that matches your user, the user that's signing in, their on-prem domain, Active Directory domain, okay? And the way that happens is what you do in setting this up is you create something called a Kerberos server object on-prem with your own key that you've got created there on-prem, and then it gets synced up to the cloud. So that's kind of the anchor point for this TGT, the ticket granting ticket part of the Kerberos that you're going to get. So that's step number two. So it's going to check for your on-premise Active Directory domain. And then what it does is Azure AD generates a Kerberos TGT for the user's on-premise AD domain. This TGT only includes the user's SID. There's no authorization data at all. It's kind of a partial formed TGT. But what it does do, and this is at step three, is it gives you a Azure AD primary refresh token. And that's the part that I think is awesome. So at step three, you've got what you need to access your tenant, but you still can't access on-prem stuff. So number four, it takes that partially formed TGT, the PRT, the primary refresh token, is out of the equation. You're just going to hold on to that. But you are going to pass that partially formed TGT and trade it out for a fully formed TGT. And at that point, you've got access to both. So boom, there's cloud, and boom, there's on-prem. And that's why there are some limitations to this. This actual guts of the part there, you do need that tenant. Okay, so, and the sources, of course, this is right from Microsoft. They've done a good job, as usual, with their documentation. So, okay, and then here's what you need to get this going. If you're in an Azure AD tenant and you're doing hybrid mode, you've got all the pieces. So down below the line, of course, is again our on-prem stuff. You've got your federation server, your domain controllers. You're running Azure AD Connect. You've got your little, I guess those are admins. Okay. And then on the outside of the perimeter network, some folks will go ahead and put a proxy out there so you can do your federation sign-ons, et cetera, et cetera. That can also be acquired or achieved through VPN, but it gets a little wonky, right? Because it's kind of chicken and egg scenario there. But that's it. I mean, this is just Azure AD on-prem stuff. There's no like added thing you got to do for this FIDO2 deploy. So that being said, what do you actually have to do to get this started? Well, there's a couple of things, and it's not bad. And in working through this checklist, you actually can address some technical debt. So number one, you can go ahead and support security keys. So you get to turn that on in your Azure AD tenant. Your Windows devices, they've got to be able to support FIDO2 security keys, of course. And then there's that Azure AD Kerberos server object that we talked about. So that gets created on-prem, and that's just a couple of PowerShells. No big deal. Then it gets synced right up to the cloud. And then, of course, Windows Hello for Business is going to take care of that password-free authentication piece for us on this. So you enable that group policy. Then your domain controller. Now, Server 2008 is the minimum level, and of course, that's EOL now. So, 2016, 2019, very, very cool stuff that's coming down the pipeline with that. And then you need your version 14320 of Azure AD Connect to be able to pass these PRTs, the partial TGTs, all this stuff that's happening. And then, of course, your Active Directory, you have to have this schema updated so that you can support the new attributes that you're pumping into your environment with this public key. And then here's the rub. A lot of folks, this is where it gets you. You do need a modern operating system. Modern in the sense it's the version that came out in May, because the pandemic, of course, put them back a little bit. So it's version 2004. The way that Microsoft does this, year first, month second, and it's Windows 10. So that's really it. But if you're thinking it sounds too good to be true, well, you are right. And it's a very new technology. So there's some limitations. Well, obviously you need that cloud piece. So this won't work with on-prem only. If you're looking to supplement your remote desktop, your virtual desktop infrastructure, your Citrix, not going to happen with FIDO2 right now, okay? Now you can use Windows virtual desktops inside of Azure with this, I believe. I think you can get in with just WebAuthn. I'm fairly certain that's possible. Almost 90, I'll say 99%. So yeah, if that's that often is a bit of a deal breaker for folks. And the reason is, if you are someone who remote desktops around your environment, checking on stuff, you've got a couple of servers, you're not quite doing, remote consoles, et cetera, the draw of getting rid of that hash, that static hash, is very real, especially with a remote desktop, because you can just go through and scrape all that stuff. So yeah, not going to happen quite yet with that FIDO2 security key. And SMIME, I'm not sure if folks are real familiar with that, but this is like currently my favorite thing ever. SMIME is a signature and encryption protocol that can be run on documents, but usually it's kind of part and parcel with emails. So if you ever see that little signature flag coming on email, that's SMIME. You can certainly use this for encryption. SMIME does encryption, but the catch is this is a PKI technology, so it's not going to happen with FIDO2. And then if you're a user that likes to switch contexts, you've got your normal user account, and then you have your privileged account, you can't do run as with FIDO2 right now. So that is clunky, right? You have to log off, log back in the new context, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a bummer. And then direct logons to servers using security keys is not a possibility. I have no idea why. I guess it's security, because you have to get up to the cloud, et cetera. But that one is not as logical as the other ones to me. And then, of course, with the use of Windows Hello for Business tying this all together, Linux and Mac clients aren't going to use Windows Hello for Business because it's not a feature for these operating systems. However, totally possible for them to enjoy WebAuthn. Modern browser is all you really need to use that part of that functionality of the FIDO2 standard. And then number 7, this is a certificate functionality. You can't enroll on behalf of a user. So think about that for a minute, right? If you have your business and you're in enterprise and you've got your 500 people and you're about to kick out 500 of these very expensive tokens, it's up to every single user to provision this. You can't do this on behalf of someone. So that's a little bit of a pickle, in my opinion. That is something Microsoft recognizes, and they're going to be working on that fervently. But yeah, that right there is a bummer. You can do other things, and we'll talk about that in a minute here, to kind of protect against other FIDO2 devices that you may not have vetted. Because just like in the world we live in, all FIDO2 is not the same. I mean, the alliance is helpful. They certainly have to get membership into this alliance, but you can buy a FIDO2 that really is just a one-time password thing. It's kind of just masquerading. So by giving your users, your staff there, the actual onus that they have to register this key and then start using it, it's a bit of a pickle. Coupled with the fact that since you're pulling all of the actual management piece out of the hands of your admins and your staff, I am a little bit at a loss to how they're handling anti-hammering. And so what I mean by that is, if you've got yourself the security key and it's got a PIN, right? So the PIN or a biometrics or whatever, if somebody's just sitting out there guessing, in a smart card world, those things will lock right up after 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you configure, try. Well, I haven't been able to get into that functionality with my FIDO2 test tokens here. I certainly use them, but there's a lot of trust. It's a lot of obfuscation, in my opinion. And I think that should get addressed. I'm sure there is a management key that's being set and tracked in the cloud, but trust and verify in this world today. So yeah, those are the unsupported scenarios and could put you off of FIDO2 deploy, perhaps. But again, let's look at this workflow of actually what it takes to register this. So before we get to the demonstration, what we're talking about with costs here is not much more than you're already forking out to Microsoft for your Azure AD tenant. The big thing with this is, of course, the security key. So I'm sure you've all have heard of YubiKey. They are huge with their leadership. The documentation, the tools they put out are awesome. But those things are like the Versace, the Gucci of the FIDO2. They're so expensive. So $55, and then you may not want to come swinging to the fence with that in your first FIDO2 deploy, because I can guarantee until folks get this in their muscle memory, there will be some loss, and that is a bit of a hurdle. But and then as far as licensing, if you are going to use certificate-based authentication part and parcel alongside FIDO2, you do need potentially that device write-back sync that's happening. And that is an Azure AD Premium P1 license, so that's another $6 a month. And I actually did have to fork out for that because I am doing CBA as well, certificate-based authentication. So yeah, that's the cost. So what does actually look like to register a credential? So let's go ahead and get that demo going. And fair warning, I'm going to pause it, so please don't throw anything at your computer, but it's a teachable moment, some of this stuff. Okay, so here we go. Okay. All right. First of all, Edge, just don't put all this stuff on your homepage. Nobody likes it. Bing, we know what we're using here. It's Microsoft Edge. But they do a great job with this FIDO2 registration, and really you can use Chrome, Firefox. The only catch is it's a modern browser. You got to be able to support CTAP, CTAP, and WebAuthn with that browser. So here we go, off to the races. Right up into our security portal here in Azure, we're going to use Windows Integrated Authentication to get in, and we should be just set. Let's just go ahead and register the key. There's no stopping us now. So you just hit that add method, switch down to security key, and we're done. No. Or not. You got to stop. And here's the reason. Microsoft requires you to use strong authentication to actually register into a FIDO2. And the point is, you can use this in lieu of a password. So you really got to do, in the certificate world, it'd be high assurance that the person giving you this credential knows that you are whom you are. So again, two-factor with this. And Azure's multi-factor authentication is fairly easy to set up for this. So let's go ahead and use that. So we've already gone in with a username and password. So we need to supplement. So here's my federation server. This account is temporarily on a password for this. And then we need the two-factor. So there's 2 factors that I'm allowing in for this federation server. We've got on our claims, we've got our Azure MFA and signing with a certificate. Well, if we've got a certificate, we probably won't be going through all this. So let's go right through Azure MFA's route. Okay, so hit that. A lot of ways to do this. You can use the authentication app. You can, in this case, we'll just get that message texted to us, enter it in. That's it. So now we've got our strong authentication, and we can proceed with registering this FIDO2 token. And so it's very kind of them to bring us right back where we left off. And that's it. Now, are we done? Not quite, but it's pretty quick. So at this point, I am going to just do a little reverse. Okay. Now, this is pretty stock. You're going to have a choice of a USB or an NFC device. NFC, of course, is contactless. That's what we're doing here. And what I have seen in practice is you really do have to get close to that reader. And think about how much data you're transmitting through this NFC protocol, that 13.56 megahertz. It's a fair bit. You've got to get some nonce, you've got to get some public keys, a lot of stuff. So it's not quick, but it's also not very slow, about 1 to 2 seconds. And then at this point, we're going to get out of this web page and back into a new web page and our WinLogin UI. And at that point, we're going to get prompted to do a whole bunch of stuff. So here we go, set up the security key. So what they're just saying is, hey, you know what? You're going to show Microsoft some of the stuff. So are you okay with that? And you just say yes. And then at this point, you go ahead and tap the device. Now, you can go ahead and set up your PIN all in one shop here. But this is a already configured FIDO2 card. They're not cheap, so I like to use them a lot. But on that same topic, I do want to bring up, you don't have to just use that card for just this one purpose. FIDO2's point is they want to be able to let you do this with any website, whatever. You can use this same device multiple times to store credentials. So if you are lucky enough to work for an employer that's going ahead and issuing a FIDO2, why not use that to dump the password on some other websites that are configured with a FIDO2 server as well? So there we go, pins in, and that is almost it. We do have to, I call this a friendly name, but basically it's just an identifier, so you know which FIDO2 security key is the term they're using that you've got up on this portal. And I am using HID. They're part of the Alliance. They're Crescendo 2300. That does PIV, contact list. It does FIDO2, does COS, does all those things. It only does a couple of those well right now. Ooh, okay, moving on. So anyway, yep, here we go. We got our security key in place and you're all set. Now that seemed really easy, right? Because I didn't see any step in there to set a management key or a PUC or any of the other stuff that comes along with smart cards. So like I said, it's a little bit obfuscated. One thing that you do notice here right away on this portal is a little arrow there that you can expand. And if I was smart enough to have done that for you, you'd see something called an AAGUID, an AA GUID. And this comes back to this topic of attestation. I'm not quite sure how to say that word, attestation. It's really a funny word. But what that is, it's an ability for the folks who manage this tenant to actually require you to use certain vendors. And so this portal right here is a really cool way to find out what your AAGUID is. And also, YubiKey's got some Python scripts to blink that at you. But that's a great way to make sure folks aren't just going willy-nilly with FIDO2 and registering whatever they want, right? So you can set up attestation to limit to particular vendors. And that's pretty much it. You've got your FIDO2 key ready to rock. So if I can get us back to, did that work? Oh, that didn't work. Don't worry, I'll get it. Aha! Oh, okay, here we go. So now let's go ahead and use this key and log in with Windows Hello for Business. Okay, so here's our test laptop, our NFC reader right down there, and our contactless card. So yeah, I'm just actually gonna put it right on there. And then I'm just gonna type in my PIN. There's that handsome devil there. And then what you're gonna see here is a switch right away to that Windows Hello screen. So now you know you're cooking with gas. So now we're into Windows Hello for Business. It's even got a little smiley face, although it doesn't have a nose, and it's getting you in. Now, what's going on behind the scenes? Well, you're getting into your Active Directory, domain, your profile, you're getting that Kerberos ticket, you're getting your primary refresh token. A lot of stuff is happening. So we can do a little bit of test here, and we can go ahead and see if we can get back into the cloud. So we'll go to Office 365. This is one of the spinning disks laptops, so it takes a little bit of time to load up here. But one thing I do want you to note here, and you'll see as I zoom in, this is a teachable moment here. So what that says is consider changing your password. Okay, just put that in the back of your head. Okay, and then there, of course, is our, oh, not there yet. Sorry. Okay, there, of course, is our portal. We won't wait the 20 years for this laptop to actually bring up the full web page, but there it is. So now we've got full access to the cloud as well. So the whole thing worked. But if we could go back, and I'll bring this so we have something better to look at. And what you saw there was that familiar password, hey, your thing's expiring, you got to reset it. How is that happening if we're not using a password to get in? Well, good question, Aaron. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and address that. So what I've done here and what I do with a lot of deploys is once you've actually moved folks off of the password, there's some really cool things you can do. Number one, you can do fine-grained password policies that actually will toggle something called a skrill bit, smart card required for interactive logon. Now, just setting that bit on an Active Directory account actually just automatically creates your password into 120 random characters. And then the hash is created off of that. So that is exceptionally hard to crack, number one. Number two, one of the threats that we all face and we just can't get around is the pass the hash scenario. So what that little banner that popped up does is I've actually, on that fine-grained password policy, expire all passwords after 24 hours. And so what that just does is it ticks that skrill bit flag, unticks it, and ticks it back again. So it's just randomizing a new 120 character string for your password. That gives an attacker 23 hours and some change to actually use that hash before you change it automatically. And this is completely unbeknownst to your users. The only thing I have noticed is some of my subscription-based services like OneNote and I guess PowerPoint here, I do have to actually unlink and link the account periodically because that hash has scrambled. But that's about it. Otherwise, it's no big whoop. Now, even with Server 2016, after you're done with an interactive logon session, Microsoft has introduced a feature that you can actually just scramble that hash anyway. So once you're in with a password-free technology and you're done with that, the hash gets scrambled automatically without that password, that little banner coming up in that fine-grained password policy. So really cool stuff. Okay, so let's do a pivot from the new FIDO 2, public key cryptography, to the tried and true PKI. And what we're looking at here is our PKI. This is a drawing I drew a long time ago. I would change some of these arrows, but it will get us to where we need to be. At the very top, PKI, of course, you've got your root of trust. Here's your root certificate authority. A lot of times this is offline so that nobody can get in there and access it. And the only thing it ever has to do is create sub-CA, so subordinate certificate authorities, and sign for a certificate revocation list. That's really all it does. Now, in this diagram, it's just a two-tier PKI. So we've gone ahead and given a certificate for a certificate authority to issue on behalf of the root. But if you'll notice there's an arrow off to the right. If I can move all of this stuff, yep. And I know I talked about minimum, right? So why do we have a certificate practice statement? Well, let's think about this. If you're going to ask staff to start utilizing this piece of hardware, and the only way they can get into their system is through this piece of hardware, it's a good idea to have a nice policy written to control things like what happens if you lose it, how many days do you have to go and get a new one, what happens if you lose it a bunch of times, all those different things that employers like to, hold over your head for good reason too, right? There's a little bit of control. That's a great place to store it. So you create your certificate practice statement that actually prints out and aligns with one of your certificate policies. And it's not terribly hard to do, and there's no real right way to do this. But the point is, you're telling users what they need to actually do to consume this leaf certificate that's stored on the card. And so it's also some way, it's a really cool way to expand on the use of this topic called OID, or object identifiers. So every single issuance policy that gets tied to a certificate template can point to its own certificate practice statement. I'm trying not to use acronyms because this is a topic that is rife with them. So we'll talk about OIDs in a minute here, but that's the point of the certificate practice statement. You can look at the certificate that's actually on the card, click the little button there that pops up if you have a CPS aligned to it, and go right to the file share, right to the web page where this thing is hosted. Go onto any website that's using HTTPS and it's a third-party CA. They all have them. They're huge, but yeah, it tells you, it tells folks who are consuming these leaf certificate what they actually need to be aware of. I'm just checking the clock because I go on and on. So yeah, so the other piece on here that is unique in this scenario with our Azure AD hybrid using certificates is the card lifecycle management system. Okay, so it is a bummer that we have to tack on this product. This is another vendor thing, and I really fervently believe that the less middleware you can pump into environment, the better you're going to be, and the better you're going to sleep at night, because it's less to patch, less to fix, less to manage, et cetera, et cetera. But here's a piece that actually empowers folks that are going to onboard your staff. Well, what does it do? Well, it does a bunch of stuff, and we'll look at one. This is the VersaSect S series that I'm running because they have a free version for up to 5 cards. But it carries a database that's going to register a serial number. It's going to change your management key for that card and scramble it and then track it inside of its encrypted database. It's going to also allow your staff to have role-based access and a whole bunch of stuff. But in a sense, it provides some sanity to having 500 of these cards out there in the environment. All you do is slide the card into the reader and it will tell you where that card is in its life cycle. So that is a cost that is not there with PIV yet. And then of course you have your Active Directory and the templates that live inside of Active Directory. And we'll look at why that is necessary. So the couple of bullet points on the left. So PIV and smart cards, the key that the private key is the point of the smart card, the FIDO2 token, is that private key is generated on the device and it never leaves that device. So if you are looking to do certain things, and we have that third bullet point there, I've got the 3 dreaded letters to some people, EFS, encrypted file system. So if you're looking to do EFS, and you're not real savvy with your key recovery agents, all the parts that actually allow you to retrieve archived keys, just don't put it on a card. Because think about it, if you've got your private key, and that is part and parcel to the EFS mechanism, you want to have that around so that if that card gets lost, you're not out of luck, because it's like ransomwaring yourself. So I always tell folks, do a lot with cards, but don't do everything. EFS, just keep it out of the mix, right? Don't put EFS certs on a card. You're just going to regret it. And that's the same with SMIME, in my opinion. SMIME, if you're doing encryption, you know, maybe issue out a different certificate for that use case, because it really is just a bummer to ransomware yourself. You don't feel good about your standing in the world. So that's that. But there's a bunch of technologies that I'm trying to let you in on about how you can grow this PKI and solve all of your problems. So mutual SSL. And then the thing that I want to show a demo of is something called Authentication Mechanism Assurance. Okay, so let's get to that. But before we do, here's what's going on behind the scene. I mentioned that we're going to be putting this in the context of Azure Active Directory Hybrid, and we are. But really, the guts of smart card authentication is Kerberos. That was the dramatic pause. That's it. The only difference with NTLM-based Kerberos is the use of something called PKINIT. I don't know the popular way to say that. It's very clunky. But as soon as you come in with a smart card, PKINIT does all the verification, the authentication, all the pieces that actually validate whom you are and check that the issuer of your credential set is trusted. So we're not going to go over the Kerberos handshake, the TGT process, the Kerberos distribution, all the stuff. But, suffice to say, that's already happening if you're running Active Directory. And this is just tacking on to that functionality. And then, of course, to access your cloud-based resources, you get some federation in there, some SAML, some SSO, those pieces that you probably already have going if you are doing an Azure AD tenant. So what do you actually have to do to get this stuff working? So for smart cards, number one, you need a PKI. That's literally the point. So you got to do it. Number two, your domain controller has to have a certificate with that KDC auth, EKU, or extended key usage, and it has to have the smart card logon on that same cert. Or you can split them up, but there's no real point. So these are going to be issued out to your domain controller on fairly regular intervals, and it's just group policy, auto pulse. You don't have to do anything. It's just automagical, and it just happens. The one thing that you do have to verify is that that certificate of your issuing certificate authority, the public key and the cert, gets dumped into the NT-Auth certificate store inside of Active Directory. And the reason is when you go to use PKINIT inside of Kerberos, it's going to go to that bucket and say, hey, this credential set that I'm being presented was issued by this CA1, this issuing CA1. Is it in this bucket? If it is, Bob's your uncle and you're good. You're going to get in with that certificate. If it's not, the whole thing's going to break. And that's why they've got some of these different buckets inside of the Active Directory, because each of these buckets serves a different purpose. This NT-Auth cert, a lot of times we see that gets populated with a bunch of different certificate authorities, but it's not necessary. You really should work, if you're doing a fully fledged PKI, look at what's in that bucket and make sure that it's there for a reason. Then your certificates, of course, have to have a certain format. So here's the UPN. It looks like an email address. A lot of times it is. And then it has to have the extended key usage, or EKU for smart card logon. That's the key, right? And the UPN, of course, is going to be stored in Active Directory, et cetera, et cetera. And we talked about the lifecycle management piece already, so we won't hammer that. Now, this slide is called Enhancements because there really are no limitations with smart cards. Remote desktop, VDI, SMIME, run as, enroll on behalf of, these are all possible. SMIME, in fact, can basically do away with 5 vendor products, in my opinion. But the one thing that a lot of people aren't real savvy with is this authentication mechanism assurance. Super duper cool. What this is a temporary security group membership once you are using a certificate that's off of a particular template. So think about that. If you've got an empty security group inside of Active Directory, and you know what you can do with security groups, SharePoint, we all know. But the only way to gain membership is by using this super secret and secure way of authentication. You can really do some cool stuff with that. And then moving on, we'll look at, websites, mutual SSL, user certificate mapping. Why force folks to keep entering in one of the 50,000 passwords they have to use. Smart cards are great with IIS, all sorts of different things. And then VPN access, no problem. Your network policy server, just spin up the policy for smart card usage, and that's it. Now, this is the topic that I did want to bring in to this discussion because a lot of folks are developers. Code signing. Well, great place to store your code signing certificate is a smart card. You got anti-hammering, it's portable, your whole root of trust lives on there, et cetera, et cetera. You can keep them in a lockbox, right, until your meeting where you are vetting whatever code somebody wants to push out into prod, or store it on HSM. It doesn't matter. But the point is, you can validate electronically every code that's running in your environment through a code signing certificate. So super cool use of a smart card there. And then the cost of this, well, the server license for the VSEC CMS S series is about $2,000. Yeah, it's a bummer. And then they tack on how many different cards, you know. But that's not the only CMS out there. There's open source stuff and etc. But I did want to mention that is a cost that you have to account for if you're looking at doing smart cards that don't currently exist for FIDO 2. So let's look at a demo. We're going to look at this using this card management software. Okay, and I think I'm doing okay on time. I want to get to that AMA. Oh, AO. This is my channel, so I'm going to try and mute this. Okay, let's just jam out. I'm going to pause it anyway. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the card life cycle. Okay, and so you've got a couple of things. Here is our operator authentication screen. So you actually have to get in with a card to use this product. I think I can. I'm just going to keep moving. And that allows you some role-based access for this. So you go ahead and authenticate in. This is the only song you'll see in this presentation, or here in this presentation. Okay, it's kind of jammy. So what's just happened here? Well, we've presented the card to the lifecycle management product, and it sees it as unregistered. So what that means is the serial number is not inside of its database, and so everything's at the defaults. Now, it's gone ahead and set the administrator key, so you can't just go ahead and revert it all to the defaults and hack it, or whatever you want to call it. The PUC is there, the PIN, I'm going to mess it up. Basically, it allows for you to unlock a bricked card, and then you've got your cards blocked, or your pins blocked. Ooh, yeah, okay. So at this point, by moving that icon down to issued, that's where the magic happens. Because what's going to happen here is this product has already come tied to a couple of different profiles. There's a card profile, so that if you do insert this YubiKey in there, it will know what many drivers used, is after, you know, all the stuff that happens inside of a card management system. But more importantly, it's going to use that enrollment agent certificate. And so that's going to allow you to enroll on behalf of someone. Oh man, that was easy. So yeah, the enrollment agent certificate needs to be on the same card you're coming into this S series product with. But again, you can go ahead and you know, find a user inside of Active Directory and get a certificate on behalf of them. And that's what we're going to do here. So there's the old ADUX screen that we've probably seen before. There's the user in question. A little more jam. Okay, and then all of that's just happened. So that's kind of the point of this this particular product, is it makes it real easy for your onboarding staff. So let's go ahead and fast forward, because the song is a little bit tough, to what it looks like to use this. Okay, so we've just gone ahead, we've issued out the certificate, it's stored on this YubiKey. We're going to use this YubiKey to log into a laptop. Okay, so the YubiKey itself is just a smart card. And when we plug it in, a little more jam. So when we plug this in, it's going to do some stuff. There's drivers that have to be present so that you can actually access the private key of the card, all the pieces in the chain. But it's also going to be running something called the certificate propagation service. And immediately after you present this card to the laptop, it's going to cache a copy of your public key and certificate in your local trust store. It's also going to allow you to import the entire chain of trust. So it really is a nice portable credential set, just like FIDO 2 is. The difference being FIDO 2 doesn't have that doesn't have the infrastructure. So the chain of trust doesn't exist. And by that fact, it becomes less complex, or it has less complexity. Now, one thing you did notice there, as soon as I removed that YubiKey, the workstation locked. It's tempting to do that, but I got to tell you, that is probably the most annoying thing ever, because if you sit there and maybe you bump it or whatever, you lock your workstation, you got an auth. But where could it be useful? Well, operational technology environment, so industrial control system, something that's super duper sensitive. You don't want someone to come in and shoulder surf or even hijack your keyboard. So that option is there, and that's done with the certificate. What is it called? Removal service or something. So anyway. That's about it. I'm getting a little long in the tooth here. So let's get out of YouTube and wrap up with this AMA demo. Okay. This is really cool. So AMA, again, allows you to join a security group if you're using a certificate that has a particular OID or object identifier. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Okay, so we're going to go in first with a smart card. Okay, so this is a contact card. Slide it in. It's trying to do NFC because it was using the profile previously for FIDO2. Make sure I'm not muted. And yeah, so we're in with our FIDO or our smart card. So with our authentication mechanism assurance running in the background, we should be able to gain local administrator privilege on this workstation. So the way we can test that, I've got a little bat file that we're going to find out what security groups this account belongs to, and we'll try and run it as administrator. So here we go. And all we get is the UAC box. So that's great. So that means we have local admin privilege on this box. And the group that's giving that to us is that little server admin group there. Okay. So that's AMA. What does it look like if we go in, same account, right? Different credential set. This is our FIDO2. So here's our login with FIDO2 again. Put it on the reader. Do your PIN, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. Anyways, two-factor, right? You have to have the card. So that's okay. Windows Hello for business. It's all this stuff we've seen already. So let's see if we can, even though it's the same account, get admin privilege on this box. Go ahead and run as administrator. Oh, snap. Nope, we cannot. Okay, and that is in a nutshell, basically authentication mechanism assurance. Because we didn't use the certificate, we don't get access to that security group. So if we look at the groups here, the only admin group that I'm currently a member in with this account is the SQL admins. There's no server admin group. So think about what you can do with that. A lot of stuff, right? A lot of stuff. That's what I'll stop. So in conclusion, I think that the time to look at the stuff is now. Hashes are super duper important, and it's time that we start rotating them a lot quicker than 30 to 60 days. And I think that this technology can scratch a lot of the itches out there in the cybersecurity landscape. Email security, SSL, mutual SSL, a lot. You could basically eliminate 10 vendors with this stuff, in my opinion. And I know a lot of people dispute that, but it's true. What one technology can do all this stuff outside of public key cryptography or public key infrastructure. So that's where I'll leave it. Thank you so much, folks. That was a lot of words, and I hope you're still awake.
Thank you, Aaron. That was great. We'll go ahead and kick off our Q&A session here. And I want to be a little selfish and start with one of my own here. Number 7 on your list of limitations, the inability of admins to enroll. I'm kind of curious your take on if you could unpack that a little more, why that's there. Like, is that a feature or a bug, essentially, that's on its way to resolution?
That's a great question. I'm not trying to find the slide. Okay, so let's look at this. I can only kind of think about this. How do I stop sharing? So the point of FIDO2 here is you're giving the power back to, you're trying to reduce the complexity. And in doing that, you're limiting this infrastructure, this whole idea of a root of trust. All that's happening here is that public-private key thing, that pairing. So how would you even, how would you actually go ahead and enroll on behalf of? The thing that makes it work with certificates is a particular certificate that often gets approved by a certificate manager. All of that is out of the equation with FIDO2. The enrollment agent certificate is what powers enroll on behalf of. And since you actually can't delineate what these different keys do, like you can with a certificate, it's just not possible. I'm not even sure how they're going to overcome that, but they really have to. It's just key. So yeah, we'll see. To be decided, I guess.
I'll save my follow-up for later if somebody else wants to jump in with another question.
I got something. So for single sign-on, does that work really well for, say, if you got to pass your AD authentication to a website or something?
Yeah, it's great. Single sign-on. You know, at that point, you're just going to exchange that FIDO to, you know, whether you're on-prem with a Kerberos TGT or if you're getting up to the cloud with your primary refresh token, you just swap it out for whatever currency your SSO is going to be using.
Do you know if it like hooks into like, say, Johnson Web tokens and things like that for?
I don't know. I guess it would have to depend on what you're doing federation with and what your SSO is using. Is it a SAML? You know, is it also doing Kerberos? That's the thing. Think of this stuff as the currency for authentication. Once you get up the stack, once you're off that currency, there's so many different paths you can take. So I'm not answering your question directly, but the reason is you really got to look at the scenario and the variables that are involved. SSOs, their thing is they can authenticate all the things, right? The single sign-on, and so this stuff will plug in, and the way that it usually plugs in is via, in my opinion, the things that I've seen is with Kerberos, or you can do SAML. But you know, really, what we're looking at here in this discussion is that Azure AD hybrid mode, and that's why I'm trying to reduce the variables. Because yeah, this stuff is crazy once you get in the weeds, especially talking about SAML and you know, all the stuff. There's just so many variabilities, variances, and I'm not an expert on SSO. I just get them to work, you know. So
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, there's something about cloning. Yeah. So how do you prevent an APT from not cloning your NFC? Aha, it's encrypted. That's it. That's the thing. So as you're, yeah. Oh, Royce jumped in there. Yeah. So you're going to, so the way I think about this, I bring this back to physical access control system. You're actually going to do symmetric encryption with that reader, right? You're going to decide on what the key is that's going to both encrypt and decrypt and use that. I don't quite know how the NFC standard is written for FIDO2. I'm assuming it's the same thing because it kind of has to. But yeah, at some point, you're just going to exchange a hex string, and that's going to be the payload. But before you get to that, you actually have to encrypt and decrypt. And there's also a tunnel that gets formed through the card and the reader that's you know, also an encrypted thing. So yeah, there has been press about these side channel attacks with NFC, but it's, in my opinion, all academic. It really is. I mean, some of this stuff is AES 128, AES 256. I mean, it's pretty skookum. So
I have a question. So you said you need to be cloud. Does that have to be Azure AD, or can you use that for AWS managed AD also?
Great. That's a great question, Arch. So WebAuthn will be your jam there. The FIDO2 part about this, in this context, by just getting on-prem access using that hybrid mode, yeah, Azure AD is going to be the jam there. But yeah, there are vendors that are coming out with their own on-prem FIDO2 server. I don't know where they are with that. So sorry, I can't answer that.
I have a question for you, Aaron, about card cost or seat cost.
Yeah.
You know, in your experience across the industry, are the prices you were listing in there, I guess, on the descent, or are there reasons that those costs are going to remain that high into the future?
Oh man, it's just such a bummer. That's, I think, the resistance to doing this full on, because does it have to be a $55 YubiKey? I was using a YubiKey for like 4 months straight, and the thing just broke. And all I can do with it now is one-time password, my password database. That's the only thing I can do with it. And it was $50, and it does NFC. Does MyFair, doesn't do the physical access control. But yeah, I just think that I wish it would come down, because you really can, you have to pull out about 4 vendors to validate this cost. And I think you can do it, but it's a bummer. Yeah, I would like to see it come down, but because this whole FIDO alliance is industry driven, and if you look who's a partner in there, they're all hardware vendors pretty much. So it behooves them to keep that cost up high, right? It's dollars. But 85% of breaches last year were based off of passwords. So, you could make the ROI argument there, I guess. Yeah, it just sucks. I don't like the fact that it's $50 for a YubiKey. I don't think anyone does.
Is the floor of that cost for the Azure hybrid that you described today, could you do it with one of the $20 security tokens? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, the FIDO Alliance page itself has all the people who have joined and have been through the certification process. And any one of those vendors will certainly have the FIDO piece. But before you look into this, I do think it does have some value. Maybe YubiKey, buy one, but see how they're handling that management key reset, because that's the guts. If you go through all of this and your management key is still stuck at the default, what's the point, right? So some of these things we have to actually trust and verify. And that's the part that I would say I'd point to YubiKey to do your proof of concept and your vetting and really understand what's happening behind the scenes, because there is no one on the landscape that does a better job than YubiKey with the tool set, the documentation. They're by far the leader. But yeah, there's less expensive models out there for FIDO2, certainly.
If some of the folks wanted to explore further in the non-AD reaches of this wild, WebAuthn for general web stuff, is that something you'd be willing to touch on in a future talk or something?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to do that as well. I think the key to actually selling this stuff to your employees is multiple use cases. You got to make sure that, because really it's in your best interest to protect your employees if you're an employer, right? So if you can get a bank that's doing FIDO2 onto the same card that they're using to get into your environment, well, that's going to be more incentive for them to track that card really well, right? Because they need it to get into their bank, they need to get into their hospital. We're not quite there. But one thing, the next huge giant that's supposed to jump into the swimming pool of FIDO2 is Apple. Bada bada boom. They're working on certifying their phones for a FIDO2 device. And once that happens, it's going to be banana pants out there with FIDO2. It's going to be huge. It really is, because Apple has a secure enclave. They've got a chip on their phone that acts as that little TPM piece on the laptop. So they've got all the pieces, and you can pull an GUID from Apple. It's all there. So yeah, that's exciting and expensive, but also exciting. Did I answer your question, Royce?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to have to step away here, but I will pass hosting over to Arsh. Thank you, Arsh, for taking over, and thank you so much for Aaron. I look forward to a follow-up. Fantastic talk. Appreciate your time tonight.
All right, thank you, Bradley.
Yeah, so we're just looking for questions for people on the stream. I am monitoring the stream for questions, so let me know if you have anything to ask. Yeah, I guess we'll just give it a couple minutes of silence, and if there's nothing, we can go ahead and end it.
Do you want to hear that YouTube song again while we wait? That was jamming.
Sure.
I'd be curious to hear how many people on the call are actively using a FIDO key for something, anything, Google today.
So I know my former team at UNC of Alaska Fairbanks, we used YubiKeys. So that's interesting to see, how YubiKeys play into it. but we are mostly on-prem, so that's a bummer.
Mhm. Yeah, the ease of use of it for, some major websites is pretty good, between Google and Dropbox and GitHub and stuff like that for on the web authn side. So it's what I'm getting at is that you want to get your feet wet with it. You could get like the $20 blue security key from Yubico, and then you could try it out by registering with some of those sites and just see how it goes. Well, it's a good idea to have a couple of keys, just like your house key or your car key. And then you've got the key, so you can start experimenting with some other stuff too. Like you can make the business case for getting a couple of keys without having to think you need to bite off the whole giant PKI thing. And then you can start, you've got the keys in hand, you can start working on the other stuff too. So just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I was going to say yes, Royce, and it was at your instigation. So
yeah, I'm all about it. I like pointing people towards it. When Google switched over to using it all for all of their employees, that you can't phish, you can't even fool somebody into sending your TOTP 6 digits to somebody and have that work. It doesn't like that. You can phish somebody, but you can't. That class of phishing is impossible with the way that the security keys work. So their support calls went through the floor, like almost nowhere, from Google employees themselves getting phished in that way.
Yeah, the password resets are gone, right? So there goes a couple hundred hours of your staff's time every year. But Google, of course, did their deploy in the Google sense is they wrote their own libraries. Yeah. So we can't actually get access to the way they're using them, but it's still the same piece of hardware. So you still get a secure enclave. You can still, it does PIV. It can probably do FIDO. It's got stuff. I use YubiKey for authentication, but I also use it for a secondary form of authentication with my password managers because I haven't been able to kick that all the way out.
That's the exact thing I was going to say, Aaron. That was the two first things that I did were take care of my password managers and email. Because if you can lock those two down, it's very tough to do, say, just a run-of-the-mill reset against something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very easy to duplicate that challenge response credential set off a secondary YubiKey and keep that somewhere safe so you don't have to lose.
Yeah, I did, again, Royce's advice. I think I'm running 3 keys total with, different ones being backups for others. So
yep.
And it also speeds things up. I'm definitely, I'd already drunk the Kool-Aid of having a password manager and having a long secure password for that and having a long secure password for my email. But all of the rest are, very long and random. So
yeah.
I'm curious, what password managers do you guys use? Because I'm a big fan of 1Password.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I'm a little old school. I use KeePass. Remember KeePass?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is that do you use self-hosted or cloud hosted?
Oh, it depends. A lot of times I have client sites, so it's under whatever auspice they have. But for my own personal, I actually use a product called Password Safe. Oh, and that was like the one of the first. I don't know why. I just like to throw a little nod to those folks because it's free and they've supported it for a number of years. So
yeah, and they've got YubiKey, some flavor of YubiKey, like old school YubiKey, like the YubiKey OTP.
Yeah.
Support, I think, in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I like 1Password. Their support for FIDO 2 is good. And then LastPass is a close second, I would say. And then I've just in the password cracking community, I've heard some scuttlebutt about Dashlane. I would avoid Dashlane as a password manager. Their security practices internally are not the kind of thing I would want to trust. That infrastructure is not reliable, in my opinion, and based on what I've heard. But 1Password and I think Dashlane doesn't, or LastPass doesn't yet support FIDO 2.
I think 1Password is basically free, like $2 a month. It's basically free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still using LastPass. The one of the features that I use a lot, I really don't know how well this compares against some of the other front runners, is being able to share hierarchies or share folders of credentials with my clients. As a consultant, that can be really handy. So, you know, in fact, I can give somebody access to something without them giving them access to the password itself. Yep. And LastPass has done fairly well on the you know, corporate security side as well. I don't think they've had any major break-ins or breaches, but the stability of the application itself leaves a little bit to be desired. So I wouldn't be averse to switching if something much better came along.
I use sticky notes on my monitor.
have you, Jeremy? Have you tried?
Hey, that's actually pretty secure, Vince. No one's coming by to look at them.
Have you tried SnapPass?
On your keyboard, not on your monitor. You know, that way you don't get the random guy walking by.
We can't see it from the webcam.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, have you tried SnapPass? It's like this open source. I think it's made. I need to Google it. It's either by Pinterest or someone. Basically, you share a password and you share a link, and the first person to hit that link gets the password.
We use that for the temporary. We want to send somebody something as a one-time.
Yeah.
Send it to them safely. Yeah.
Yeah, it is by Pinterest, and they have really shitty documentation, but they have a Docker Compose system. And as long as I can do a Docker Compose up-d, I'm happy with anything. Yeah.
Before I forget, back to our main topic. Is there a way to do for us password Luddites? Is there a way in Windows Hello land to set up what you described and require that there also be a PIN? And it's not the presentation of the physical.
So Royce, this is my answer to that, and it's Microsoft centric. I apologize, but I use the Microsoft Authenticator. That literally is it's pretty darn close to FIDO too. And so that would be my answer to you. So if you were somebody that did like your own Office 365 license for your own home or household, grab that Microsoft Authenticator app, because it's like password-free technology. And you can also add two-factor with the face recognition on your phone, or you can do a PIN or something like that. But I believe that's a FIDO 2, I think. I'm probably wrong. I'm going to stop talking where I don't actually have the trust and verify going. But that would be my answer. I'm pretty sure it's barking up that FIDO 2 road. I don't quite know if it's been certified, though. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you've got your Office 365, and you can do cloud only FIDO 2 completely okay. So you don't actually need the on-prem. The one thing I will say about password-free technology, if you're not talking FIDO 2, there's no certainty that you've got private key protection, because some of the ways that Microsoft is doing this is they'll hold your private key and they'll issue on behalf of. And that's probably okay, but I don't do probably. So I need the security of that. I need the thingamajig, the hardware. I need to know that my key is with me. So that would be my 2 cents on that piece.
Yeah. When I see passwordless, that usually to me that means either it really isn't passwordless in that there is still something that there is a PIN involved, and that losing somebody can't just grab my badge and then waltz in somewhere and then be a local admin on my workstation. And I'm still going to get prompted for the PIN, or so either there really is a PIN, it's not really passwordless, or it doesn't require something I know, and all you have to have is physical possession, and it's just like my house key; it'll let you in. There is no that's in my world that feels like that's one factor.
Yeah,
and that's not enough.
No.
Yeah, so I will always want the PIN, and I want to be able to, at the enterprise level, say, sure, we can now NFC our way in, but you're still going to have to be, for certain activities, still be prompted for the PIN or whatever.
There has been some fascinating ways people are hacking into this FIDO 2 thing. And what I've read about it is attribute manipulation. So they'll go in, create single-use certificates, single self-signed certificates, and pump the public key into the attribute inside of Active Directory. But I don't see that as an attack. For one thing, that hardware attestation piece should eliminate that. And frankly, I think that these days there are certain attributes in Active Directory that should just trigger an alert. And one of them is a UPN change. Because, yeah, certainly with a smart card, you can go in and change someone's UPN and get in with your own card. I don't know why you would do that, because you would still have to have the certificate issued by a trusted CA, go through the whole chain, et cetera, et cetera. But that one attribute that's storing a public key, that's fascinating to me. So I would say if you're doing FIDO2, also plug in on your CM or look at some kind of alerting mechanism to see if somebody's going through and changing attributes willy-nilly, because that is definitely a viable attack in some ways of FIDO2.
Interesting.
I have a question. Do you think at some point in time Microsoft will support FIDO2 and the run as? Because
no? Yes, I think they will. Yes, absolutely. I don't know why I said no. They have to. And they also have to enroll on behalf of. I mean, in a lot of ways they're taking plays out of the smart card playbook, but a lot of ways they aren't. FIDO, the whole point of it was to reduce complexity. But yeah, I mean, we have to do our jobs, and that's a key component. You need to switch context when you need to switch security context. That's just how it is. So I don't know when though. I mean, it took forever just to get this friggin' 2004 update, so I can't speak to the speed of when.
Yeah, because I'm curious, because like that seems to be best practice, because like you have a normal user account and you have an admin user account, and then when you want to switch to your admin, you just do a run as, and then you switch to that context.
Absolutely. Yeah, and some of the whatever I call them, the restrictions or something, they're real. Like they certainly would put off a full-blown deployment. VDI right there. I mean, that's a huge deal. That's remote work for a lot of different companies. So yeah, nobody's asked me how profitable PKI running that business is in Anchorage, and I appreciate that. The answer is not. It's not. But part of this, I do think that FIDO2 is cool and it's really new and awesome, but it just can't touch the scope and breadth of a good PKI. So I guess what I would say, and probably start leaving on, is they don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can certainly run in parallel. But one thing I will caution you on, if you have a card that does PIV or X5 or smart card and FIDO2, it sucks trying to switch between Windows Hello for Business and that FIDO2 piece. It's just that part is not there. So whatever you're using to get into your workstation is kind of what you're going to use, unless you want to just hit your head against the wall every time you try and switch that mechanism. So
good to know. Word to the wise. Well, this has been informative. A bit of a drinking from the fire hose, but that's what we signed up for. So it's good. I appreciate the depth of your knowledge in this space.
All right, folks.
Interesting. No, that's. It was the right size of fire hose for the amount of water you had to deliver. Like this. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go put a 3-year-old to bed soon, so I'm gonna have to bounce. But thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, it is 8:30. So if anyone does have any last questions, last call for questions, and then if there aren't any, we can end this meeting on a good note. Unless Jeff or Dave have anything to say.
I'll jump in. So we have another hackathon coming up next month. It's going to be the 16th through the 18th. It's going to be all virtual, and we are looking for local businesses, whether they're tech-oriented or not, who might have some projects. Just always looking for ways to get local business involved. So whether you need some tech help and there's something that a programmer might be able to tinker on for an afternoon and help you out, we'd love to hear about it. Or if you'd just love to figure out a way to get involved with the Developers Alliance, that's a great way to just kind of get to know people and see who's in the group. And then, of course, any college students, they were our primary demographic last year, and we'd love to have that kind of participation as well. This year's hackathon is a bit career-oriented, so what we're doing is offering some resume review and mock interviews and things like that. So the hope is that if we can get local businesses and get programmers in the same place and help people work on resumes, then we can link people up with jobs. So if you can help on any side of that equation, we'd love to have you. And yeah, if you got any thoughts, feel free to reach out. We're going to be sending out another newsletter here soon, talking a bit more about it.
Dave or Jeff, can you guys let us know the email that anyone interested can contact us at?
Yeah.
What's the email?
Say that one more time.
What's the email? Like, if anyone wants to get in touch with us about the hackathon, what should they email us at?
I'd say info@akdevalliance.com. Yeah.
All right, yeah, that's the end. Unless people have questions about the hackathon or what we talked about this evening, we will see you in a month, I guess, or before that for the hackathon.
Yeah, sounds good, Arsh. Thank you, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you later.